All right, welcome back. While we were on break, I had a question about ripening or ripened contingency. A ripened contingency is one that has been met. That's the easiest way to say it. All right. So whatever the contingency is, if you subject to the buyer giving written approval of the inspection within 10 business days, and the buyer gives that written approval, that contingency has been met or it has been ripened is the term. All right. So ripening is really just, I hate to say a legal term, but it's a term that you would use when the contingency has been met or cleared or satisfied. It's now in full force as part of the purchase agreement. That's all it really is. Okay. All right. Now I know you guys are getting a little antsy. We're getting close to the end here, and there's only so much we can talk about contingency clauses, even though they're important. At their heart, they're pretty basic animals to deal with. All right. So in the purchase agreement and the property inspection, there are a couple different ways that we can maximize the benefit of those clauses. All right. So for example, to maximize the benefit for your client, you want to make sure that you can put in limiting factors that allows your client to, finger quotes, escape the purchase agreement should something pop up that he doesn't like. For an example, the property inspection response. I have used this clause many times. If the repairs are over X dollars, the buyer can void the deal within 48 hours of the inspection response. All right. So we would send over the inspection response saying we want this and this fixed, or what's the deal with the foundation, and if the guy comes back and says, well, we're not fixing it, but it's $4,800. Well, if we have a clause in there that says if the repairs are over $1,000, then we don't want to buy the property. That would be a limiting factor that would allow my client to escape, not escape. No X, escape. I get people all the time that give me a hard time about the word realtor. Because most of us say a lot. How do you say it? Yeah, realtor. There's no A in that. Realtor. I was on when I used to do radio. Everybody remember the Real Estate Monkey? I used to do talk show. That was probably the number one complaint call-in that I got all the time. Was people kept saying, it's the realtor, it's not realtor. Okay, so escape. Give your client a chance to escape. Reminds me of, you guys see my cousin Vinny? The two Utes. What's a Ute? It's youth. All right. So limiting factors allow your client to escape a purchase agreement. And that benefit you want to write in to protect your client. Now, for the purchase agreement, you could put anything subject to blah, 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 subject to my wife approving the deal within the next 48 hours. That would be a limiting factor to allow your client to escape this deal. Subject to my attorney approving this deal. Subject to my dog singing the alphabet. All right? Whatever it is, as long as it's agreed upon in your purchase agreement. Now, that's a key factor because just because you write a contingency doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be accepted. They being the other side, can counter a contingency to either alter it, or they could actually finish the contingency if the other side wrote an improperly written contingency. All right. Now, for an example, subject to my attorney's response or my attorney's approval. That was an example I showed you just to show what ripening meant. However, that's really not a good, well-written contingency. Why is it not a good, well-written contingency? Somebody? Anybody? David? Yeah, exactly. No time frame. No time frame in that. So that was an illustration of a point, and I didn't want to confuse you with a bunch of other stuff. But in the real world, that's not a well-written because it doesn't give a time frame. So if I'm a seller of a property and let's say the buyer writes a purchase agreement subject to the approval of his attorney, and I get that. I receive it from my client. I'm going to look at that and go, well, heck, he could approve that in 90 days. When is he going to approve it? I might have to counter back a contingency just to finish his thought. You know, subject to your attorney's approval within 48 business hours. So now we have finished that contingency for him because he either did it on purpose, maybe he's trying to be sly, or just wrote it improperly, an improper contingency. So they can be countered back, and they're countered back sometimes to finish an improperly written one. You can also counter back, which can completely change the counter, or they can actually eliminate the counter. They may not allow you to have that counter in the deal. So you may be subject to my dog singing the alphabet by Friday at noon is in your offer. I might counter back that no contingency is allowed. So I've countered back and I've completely eliminated that counter. Okay? You could counter back a change. The one that I told you a minute ago. Right up here. If the buyers, if the repairs are over $1,000, the buyer can void this deal within 48 hours of the inspection response. Maybe I'll counter that and say, we'll accept this, but that counter is if it's over $3,000, then we'll accept it. So you can counter a contingency for many different reasons. They can eliminate it. They can change any of the factors in the counter, or they could actually further qualify it or finish the counter because it was improperly written. Now, that counter would come back to me on the buyer's side, and one of two things. Now we start playing ping pong. We could recounter back, $1,500 in repairs instead of, we wanted $1,000, you countered $3,000, now it's $15,000. Or you just completely say, no, we're not going to accept your counter and move to another offer, because if you're raising that price from $1,000 to $3,000 in repairs, that probably means you may know something. All right. Or if they eliminate, subject to my wife's approval within 48 hours, and they say, we are going to accept your offer, but we're going to counter back that there is no time period given for your wife to accept. You have to have it written with her acceptance on it, or we're not accepting it. And so they've completely eliminated that contingency. All right. So that's how you would waive one. Let's go back. Yeah, that's how you would counter. And you can counter for many different reasons. Okay. We're getting real close. Don't forget, stick around for you guys at home. If you have any more questions or any questions at all, give me and shout me out with an email. I'm at raymond@realuniversity.com, or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/realuniversity if you want to send me a question that way. All right. Got just a little bit more to do, so don't go away.